Hey friends, welcome to Make Anything. I'm Devin, and the mission for today's video is simple. I just want to find the best drawing surface for the 3D pen. So as you can see, I have this big pile of materials. Some of these are official 3D pen drawing mats. Others are just material that I got from around the house or I picked up recently in hopes of finding the ideal, perfect material to draw on. Just like with a 3D printer, finding the right surface to print on top of is very important and more difficult than you might think, because we've got this material that starts really hot and cools down, it starts molten and it hardens, and when we're drawing we want it to stick, but then when it's done we want it to come off easily. I figured the best way to get a definitive answer is to just have all the materials in front of me, test them out, and see what happens. So that's what we're doing today. Let's go. Cool. For today's comparison, I'll be using this pair of 3Doodler Create Plus 3D pens. One will be loaded with PLA filament and the other with ABS, since those are the two most common. Let's start off with this 3D Mate base 3D pen mat, since I've used this one several times in many videos. It's pretty cool because it's got all these different grids which you can draw into, and that'll help you get more precise shapes if you're trying to make squares, triangles, circles, and the like. So I'll basically be drawing some 1-inch squares to test the adhesion of these different 3D pen mats. If the corners stay down, that's a pretty good sign that you can draw on this 3D pen mat and your parts will stick down. There's the PLA, and here is our ABS filament in yellow. ABS is definitely a trickier filament to use because it shrinks a lot more and it operates at a higher temperature, which means it has trouble sticking to a lot of surfaces. In this case, the grooves help hold the part down. So let's also try just on the flat part of the mat to get an even comparison. Here on a smooth part of the silicone mat, you can see that we do have some trouble with the ABS filament. And this is going to be a common trend because, like I said, ABS is the trickier one to deal with. PLA still works fine, and that's my favorite material to work with, so that's pretty cool. Threedissimo makes a similar silicone mat. It's made up of 4 separate panels that stick together like this, although it doesn't really make sense because, for one thing, they don't really stay together. The silicone is a bit too soft, and there's not really much benefit. I mean, yes, you can rearrange them into one long line like this, but with the circle, for example, you can't have the swirls facing in opposite directions, and you can't even mix and match. The grid lines don't line up with the circle lines. What's up with that? Missed opportunity. Trying this out, we basically get the same results as with the 3D Mate. It works well for PLA and ABS if you're using the grooves, but if you're using a smooth surface, the ABS does not stick. So those silicone 3D pen mats are pretty nice, but they're kind of pricey, and I was wondering, aren't there other mats that are also silicone that could work just as well? So that's why I got this soldering mat. So this thing was only $6 on Amazon, and it's pretty much the same thing because all of these mats are made of 100% silicone. So it's got a few different features made specifically for holding screws, and it's got a measuring tape, but the surface is the same. So as expected, the PLA sticks really nicely, and the ABS once again fails. So that's one alternative silicone mat that's way cheaper than the 3D pen mats. And here's another one, silicone baking mats. Once again, this is a 100% silicone mat, although it's much more thin, and it's slightly transparent, enough so that you can trace something underneath it, which is definitely handy. As with the other silicone mats, the PLA sticks down really nicely, and the ABS, well, this time it actually almost started to stick, but not quite. I really like this mat. It's very large, it's flexible enough so that the parts pop off easily, and it's so thin that it rolls up really nicely, so easy to store. So, kitchen supplies are cheap, huh? Well, how about this flexible cutting mat? This is another super cheap option. I got a 4-pack for $10, and this isn't made from silicone. I believe it's HDPE, high density polyethylene, since that's a food safe plastic that's used for most plastic cutting boards. The PLA sticks down really nicely. And the ABS, well, it also sticks down quite well. Only at the very last moment did it pop off, but not until I was done drawing my square, so that's pretty good. You can also use the backside for another texture, and yeah, well, the texture is going to show on the bottom of your 3D pen drawings, but it's kind of nice. One big caveat is that the nozzle will melt the plastic if it's touching the mat directly. So hot plastic on the mat seems to be fine, but the nozzle itself will definitely burn the mat pretty much instantly. The same goes for these other plastic 3D mats. These are the official mats from 3Doodler and 3Dissimo. Here we have the 3Doodler Doodle Pad, and this one's nice because it's very clear, so it's very good for tracing anything that you want to place underneath it, and it's also got all those grids on it as well. It handles both PLA and ABS quite nicely. Like I said, it will also get burned by the nozzle, but you just gotta be careful not to touch the nozzle to the mat. Otherwise, it works really well. As for the 3Dissimo mat, it didn't work quite as well with the ABS plastic. It was similar to the flexible cutting mats, so I would just go with that. I also had this sheet of polycarbonate laying around, and I had a suspicion that this is the same plastic that 3Doodler uses, so I might as well give it a shot since this stuff is very cheap as a raw material. Trying it out, however, it was a bit different. The parts stuck down very well, but the surface was also a bit damaged by the molten plastic, so I wouldn't expect this to last too long. Here's another plastic sheet I picked up from Hobby Lobby. It was only $2 and it's actually a quilting template plastic. I thought it might work, so I gave it a shot, and clearly that's not gonna work too well. Well, I tried, so you don't have to. Next up, there's this 3D mat that I found inside the packaging for the 3Dissimo. It's actually part of the packaging hidden on the bottom, which I thought was pretty clever. And it's kind of a glossy laminated paper plastic hybrid feeling type thing. Both the PLA and ABS stick down really well, but they also seem to damage the surface a little bit, so it's another one of those options that works, but probably not for too long. How about just a sheet of cardboard? This is pretty much what I was doing when I first started out with the 3D pens, so might as well give it a shot. As I've experienced in the past, it actually works quite well for adhesion. Both the PLA and ABS stick down fairly well. The PLA actually sticks a little bit too well. It actually connects to the fibers of the paper. But the ABS, weirdly enough, doesn't do that, and it actually provides just enough adhesion to get your design down onto the surface. So it's actually a very good option and very cheap. You can just use the box that your 3D pen is shipped in. Well, if cardboard works, how about wood? Here I have some 1/4 inch plywood, and the PLA sticks to it, and ABS sticks to it decently as well. Once again, the PLA takes a little bit of that surface with it, and the ABS doesn't. And I decided to try the other side, which has a little bit more texture, and on that side, the ABS actually sticks even better. So this might not be the most practical solution. It's not flexible, it's not transparent, but it seems that both ABS and PLA can stick quite well to unfinished wood. Interesting option. Well, since we're trying everything around me, why not this cutting mat itself? Or this much more used up older version of my cutting mat, just in case. PLA sticks down really well, and ABS also sticks quite well. Once again, the nozzle does melt the surface, so you gotta be careful not to go directly onto the surface, but plastic itself seems to work pretty well on these cutting mats. Well, on closer inspection, it does seem to pick up some of the paint from the surface of that cutting mat, but still works. Just something to keep in mind. Lastly, I wanted to try 3 different bed surfaces for my 3D printers. I figure if it works for a 3D printer, it might as well work for a 3D pen as well. Let's start out with this borosilicate glass sheet from my Creality printer. Of course, glass is completely clear, so it's really nice if you need to trace anything. PLA sticks well, and ABS, not so much. But yeah, definitely a decent option if you need to trace something, but glass is a bit cumbersome and fragile, so not necessarily the best in every regard. I also tried out this ultra base bed, also from Creality, and PLA seems to stick a little bit better, but still no luck with ABS. Also, it's not very transparent, so it would be hard to trace anything, and once again, pretty cumbersome. But lastly, how about some of this build tack material? This is an adhesive build plate, but we'll just use it as is so that we can use the flexibility. Build tack is a pretty aggressive build surface, so I'm not surprised that the PLA sticks very well, although it does warp the surface a bit because of how flimsy it is, but ABS does also stick to it, so that's kind of impressive. And you can flex it to easily pop off the prints. There are some marks here left over, so you can see that there's a bit of damage to the build surface. So once again, it won't last forever, but it does provide pretty good adhesion when it's brand new. All right, some pretty interesting results here. So I guess the first conclusion is that, well, ABS and PLA are pretty different materials, so depending on what you're gonna print with, you might wanna choose a different drawing surface. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm a much bigger fan of PLA. It's easier to work with, it's more environmentally friendly, it doesn't smell. ABS smells really bad and I can't get over it, and I pretty much never want to use ABS if I can help it. That said, if you do need to print with ABS, surprisingly, it seems like just straight up cardboard is the best material. If you're printing with PLA and ABS, I think the 3-doodler pad worked the best. If you want a cheaper alternative, just get one of these flexible cutting mats for the kitchen. Both of these work really well for both ABS and PLA, the only downsides being that they can be melted if the tip of your 3D pen is actually touching the surface. For PLA, I'm still a big fan of silicone. So yes, there's a 3D Mate mat like this. You can pay $40 to get this thing. If you actually want to use the molded features like the circle guide and the square grid and things like that, maybe it's worth it. There's also cheaper versions of this product on Amazon. I'll link to it all in the description. But the cheapest silicone mat you can get is probably a kitchen baking sheet made of silicone, or maybe a welding mat. But I really like this baking sheet. It's huge, it's transparent enough that you can trace things from underneath it, and it's very lightweight, so you can roll it up and store it really easily. As one final test, let's go ahead and try out some nylon filament on these favorites of mine. Nylon is notoriously difficult to 3D print with, so let's see if any of these surfaces work well for the 3D pen. So I loaded up this 3-doodler nylon filament, and right away I was pretty surprised. I've had this filament for about a year sitting in the closet, and there's no steam and crackling like I've experienced with old nylon filament for my 3D printers that's gathered moisture from the air. So I have a feeling this might be some kind of nylon blend, but hey, it's printing really nicely, and look at that, it sticks to the cardboard really well. That's actually pretty perfect. As for the build tack surface, it's very similar to the ABS, but it does leave quite a mark. Here on this silicone cooking mat that I love so much for PLA, well, the nylon filament actually does stick semi-decently. Here on the cutting mat, also pretty good. Cardboard, though, seems to be the clear winner for this nylon filament. Pretty interesting. All right, so I guess nylon is actually easier to work with than I imagined with the 3D pen. It seems to behave very similar to ABS, so the drawing pads that work well for ABS should also work well for nylon. As far as flexible filament, wood filament, metal filament, things like that, which 3Doodler also provides, those all behave very similar to PLA, if not easier. So anything here that works with PLA should work with those materials as well. So, did I find one definitive answer for the best 3D pen mat? Not exactly. It kind of depends on the material. If I had to pick one mat, I'm gonna go with this silicone baking mat. It's super cheap, super easy to work with, works great with PLA, which is what I like to use. Do you agree with me? If not, that's okay. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think is the best 3D pen surface? Do you have ideas for other surfaces that might work better? Maybe, but I think I tested a lot. Subscribe if you want to see more of what I do. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked what you saw. And if you're interested in buying any of this stuff, I'll put links in the description. Anyways, that's it for today. So until next time, I'm Devin. This is Make Anything. And as always, stay inspired.